Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cooking with Big Mark.
Good day, folks. Well, today we're going to talk, maybe for the next few sessions, about some different ingredients. Being the old git that I am, I mostly centered all my cooking on European, American, and continental style cooking. I was never really very familiar with any items from Asia or China, other than Chinese food, but Thai foods and all these new things, South American, that have now become so prevalent in all our eating habits, either through the fast foods or what else, and trying new recipes and all these fusions of French and Japanese, German and Chinese. I can't imagine what that might be. That may be more confusion than fusion, but at any rate, it's the ingredients come up. So I thought the next few times what we do is go into some of these ingredients. And for those who haven't used them or don't know what they are, to sort of dig into them and let you know what they're all about and how they're used and different ways to use them. Three I'm going to do today are oyster sauce, hoisin sauce, and mirin. Now, oyster sauce actually is made from oysters. They caramelize oysters and they sort of reduce them all down to get a very strong juice. Then they add salt, sugar, soy sauce, and a lot of cornstarch to sort of thicken it up. It's both sort of sweet and salty, and sort of that umami taste that people always talk about. And that's where it comes from. And it's used mostly in Asian and Chinese foods for stir fries and meat marinades and for dipping sauce. It's a umami flavor. I think we talked about it before, but one way to sort of, you want to get an idea of it, is if you have a piece of cantaloupe and just eat it by itself, a nice sweet piece, then put a little salt on it and eat another piece. You'll see right away the difference, how your taste buds sort of spruce up and open themselves up to sort of get a much fuller flavor. And that's what the umami, that's what they're sort of talking about. So anyway, too much of it can be used at times. There's a chemical, chloropropanol, something that's pretty close to pronunciation, is something that is supposed to have some potential for cancer, but you'd have to eat an awful lot of it in order to have any problem with it. And some soy sauces have that same problem. So that's what the oyster sauce is. And for those who think that you've never had it before, any of you have ever had King Pao anything, King Pao beef, King Pao shrimp, King Pao chicken, you've had oyster sauce, because that's one of the main ingredients of it. So it's another flavor enhancer that that people use and to brighten up their foods and variety of foods. Hoisin can sometimes be substituted, and it's a little bit different. Hoisin can really be translated going back into meaning seafood. And of course, there is no seafood in it at all. It's one of those things that happens where they get these names, but it's basically made from soybeans, sesame seeds, chili, garlic, vinegar, sugar, salt, and again, some sort of starch, whether it's cornstarch or something else, to sort of thicken and give it its viscosity. It's almost like our own barbecue sauce. Ours becomes a little sweeter, but that's really what it is. That's what a lot of the good uses that they do. They will take it for glaze, for glazes on meats. It's almost more like a table condiment. It's hoisin's a little less salty than is the oyster sauce, and stir fry and all kinds of things that things along that way. So it's those are the two sauces that are now people find repeated in recipes. So that's what they're made of, and that's what they're all about. The third thing we're talking about is mirin. The mirin is a sweet rice wine, and it's used mostly made for cooking. There's some that you can possibly drink, but it's not really geared for that. It's around 14% alcohol, which is the same as most of our wines over here. And it's made from steamed mushi rice and molten rice. and they ferment it, and they add alcohol, which develops a lot of sugar. And that's where the sweetness comes from. And that's when, again, going back to the flavor, to make things shine and sweetness and also aroma, are developed from the use of the mirin. It's particularly good for chicken teriyaki, for steamed meats that come out you want to put on, and vegetables as just to sort of give it a little splash. A lot of times after you have making a saute of some kind, like we talked back in the days about apple cider and being added vinegar rather at the end, or other things that gives a little brightness, like citrus does, lemon juice, whatever. Other ways to use it, you can mix it with some soy sauce and wasabi. And for people who are younger into the sushi bit, that's a lot of people use for the sushi dipping sauce.
Oh, that sounds great.
And so, as I say, mirin, soy sauce, and the wasabi. Other people will mix it with apple cider and use it sort of a sweet glaze on ham. So it's similar to sake, but it's much less alcohol in it. It's very good for stir fries, as I said. Substitutes, if you see it and come across the recipe, could be dry sherry or marsala.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see, again, we think of veal marsala, you could do, this is their version. If they use veal with the mirin, it's the same as the Italian, it's just what grows in their backyard, so to speak. The other big thing about mirin is if you have it, which I didn't realize, I think I bought a bottle, but it only lasts about 2 months and it should be kept in the refrigerator once open. So those are three of the things that I think people come across now with all these mixing and all the different cuisines and culinary traits that we come across in today's modern world. And so now you can use those and have an idea of what they are, and it's just not that strange thing that for me was mostly foreign, I must say, for most of my life. So enjoy them.
Yeah, you started taking a real interest in foodways that you hadn't explored before in the 90s, or that Armenian store that we used to go to in Watertown.
The lamb, they had great lamagum, which is like that thin pizza type thing with the lamb mixture on it. They also had a fabulous bread, like sort of a chewy Armenian bread that was wonderful. And I mean, again, it's what you know, and people turn their noses up, and I was one of them. To mention sushi being, I talked about this before. I mean, I still don't eat sushi. I'll have a California roll once in a while. I'm just raw fish, or even canned fish, which is now becoming a big deal. There's an article on either Food and Wine or something recently about how many people are using the canned fish, like sardines, mackerel, tuna and stuff. Of course, I've been having canned fish all my life. I didn't realize it because with tuna fish. And if I ever wanted to do salad niçoise, I always knew I wanted the tuna I wanted to get was impacted olive oil instead of water.
Right.
But that was the only fish. Now, why I thought the other ones are going to be different, but I just wasn't. Even when I went to Denmark, I remember the smorgasbord on the ferry that we were going over. It had these myriads of bowls of all kinds of roll mops and fish, but I never touched them because I just wasn't acclimated to it. So anyway, it's always fun to explore, and you find you really don't eat almost anything once you put your mind to it.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking when you were talking about a possible fusion of German and Chinese cooking is how much sausages are a big deal in both cuisines.
Good point.
That's an interesting intersection. Aunt Judy was saying in Germany, in order to lure people into getting vaccines, they're offering a free sausage at the conclusion of your 15-minute period after you get shot.
No, I bought a package of Chinese sausages last week. It was on sale. I put it in the freezer, which I really like. It's just a different flavor. It's sweeter. And it's probably got that same hoisin oyster sauce type of filling when it's being made.
Flavor complexion, exactly.
Yeah.
So what I thought I would talk about today, since we're sort of talking about flavor agents in regards to the bar or your home bar, is infusions. And it seems like a very simple thing, and it is a very simple thing. I mean, if you want to infuse something with vanilla, if you're a vanilla vodka drinker, you can make something with infinitely more flavor and complexity, literally just by slicing a vanilla bean and putting it into a 750 milliliter bottle. The taste is so fresh and piquant and amazing. And putting herbs in just soaking herbs and spirits can give a wonderful different complex note to a spirit. But it's interesting, I tend to not think about the science behind things because I wasn't a particularly good student of science in high school. But when you are infusing alcohol, the alcohol is basically working as a solvent. And what's interesting about ethanol, as a thing, is that it binds to both fat soluble and water soluble molecules. So you think about something like rose water or orange flower water, that's distilled water with your petals, and so that will bind the ethanol. But you can also do fat soluble concoctions. Fat washing first became popular in New York City around 2007, and the most famous version of it was this cocktail that was a bacon and bourbon combo. And the way that you fat wash is essentially you add your fat. In this case, it would have been bacon fat, and you have to have it warm so it will bind with the alcohol. But then you freeze it, and then the majority of the fat rises to the top. You can just take a spoon and flip it right off the top of the container, and you have an intensely flavored bacon bourbon. People have done all sorts of bizarre things, of course. You take an idea, it's like how far can you push it. I always wanted to do a like caramelized lamb brandy, and then I just was kind of like, leave the sheep alone, this is too much. But it's an interesting idea, and it's what's so fascinating about it is of course there is some residual fat even after you freeze it off, but you really get this intense flavor, and bacon and bourbon certainly pair gorgeously together. But getting back to the idea of the vanilla pod, most alcohol that you infuse, it's really simple. And vanilla is an interesting example because you probably want to let it sink into the alcohol and let the alcohol act as a solvent for 3 to 4 weeks. You more like you're making bitters. But in the case of fresh herbs, fruit, that kind of stuff, you really can get a nice flavoring in a very short amount of time. And in fact, leaving, for instance, a cocktail that I created that I'll talk a little bit about shortly, calls for a thyme infused gin. And this week I left the thyme in a little too long, and it was very dark, but it was still good. But you can definitely go past that point with other herbs where it's going to taste brackish or too strong, and you're not fresh and herbal, but grungy and dungy. You don't want that. But it's a really nice way to add complexity. When I was coming up with this cocktail that I was basing on the series of Corpse Reviver cocktails that were first popularized in the 1930s book, The Savoy Bartending Guide. And this guy, Craddock, had recipes for Corpse Revivers number 1 and 2, but there's been a proliferation of them. And so my idea with this cocktail was this would be the 7,000th iteration of the Corpse Reviver. So I called it the CR 7000. It sort of sounds like a...
What, Corpse Reviver? What?
Corpse Reviver. So the idea was these were cocktails. When you think of the drinking culture was vastly different in this country and in England back in the day, partly because of the lack of potable water. But the idea was they used to call doctors corpse collectors, because wasn't very, advanced at that time. But these cocktails that you were supposed to enjoy in the late morning, would get you revive the corpse, especially if you had been drinking the night before, which in those cultures, of course, people would have been, because that was the only way to get water, because potable water was such an issue. But the sort of basic building blocks are usually citrus. You see anise in a lot of examples, and then gin is, generally speaking, the spirit, although the corpse reviver #1 is cognac based, and the different corpse revivers go all over the map. But I wanted to come up with something that kind of played with some of the central, traditional ingredients in that genre of cocktails. So in this case, it's a thyme infused Ford's gin paired with limoncello, because I'm working in an Italian restaurant, and that's providing the citrus and also some body, because limoncello, especially when you put it in the freezer, is wonderfully unctuous. And then you just adding a little lemon juice for added citrus, because limoncello is pretty sweet. And then a little bit of Amaro, the Ramazzotti Amaro. And that, we batch the cocktails because we sell a fair number of them. And you're adding probably 3 teaspoons of Amaro for a 750 bottle. It really is just, you're using it like a bitter. You're not using it in a large quantity. And then right before the cocktail goes out, I take my little perfume sprayer of I'm ready, and do 2 or 3, and that adds your anise element, which is a very sort of common trope among these cocktails. And it is very interesting to me, to make a gin cocktail and with Amaro and have it be something that people order. I mean, I thought this was going to be a niche item, and they're selling like hotcakes. I think the limoncello makes it more accessible. People have so many romantic notions around limoncello, and grandfathers who used to make it and that sort of thing. So that must be what gets people into the idea.
It's also a name they recognize too, which is a good part of why people order things.
You think the limoncello just has name recognition?
Well, I'm sure it does.
It was interesting. The original version did not have thyme, and my friend who I work for has a really amazing palate, and she's like, there should be thyme in this. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, there should be thyme in this. So that was the birth of the CR 7000. But it's really, doing infused alcohol, very few people are going to be fat washing at home, but something like adding a vanilla bean, it's so easy, and it just provides so much flavor and complexity. And so something a little different. So anyway, this has been Cooking with Big Mark. Thank you all for joining us on YouTube, and we're also on Facebook. And we'll see y'all later. Thanks, Dad.
You're welcome. Time after time.
God, that's right.